Norfolk Naval Station sprawled across the Virginia coastline like a steel fortress, its gray buildings stark against the June sky. The year was 1989. The Berlin Wall still stood, though cracks were forming. The Soviet Union was crumbling, but old adversaries remained vigilant, watching each other across an invisible divide that had defined the world for decades. Here power was measured in aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and the unspoken authority of those who commanded them. In this fortress of naval might, Lieutenant Rebecca Mitchell walked with measured steps, her polished shoes clicking against the gleaming hallway floor. At 28, she carried herself with the practiced composure of someone who had learned early that showing weakness invited predators. Her Navy uniform fit perfectly, every crease precise, every button gleaming a armor of professionalism she wore with practiced ease. She had been summoned to the office of Admiral William Harrington, and that was never good news. Rebecca paused before the heavy oak door, straightened her already straight collar, and took a deep breath. The brass nameplate gleamed, Admiral William Harrington, USN. His reputation preceded him, a naval legend whose career spanned from the Cuban Missile Crisis to classified operations in the South China Sea. Men like Harrington built their lives on discipline and unwavering adherence to the chain of command. Men like Harrington did not summon junior officers for pleasant conversations. Enter, came the gruff response when she knocked. Admiral Harrington sat behind his desk, silver hair cropped close to his scalp, a face weathered by sea and sun into something resembling carved granite. At 58, his posture remained ramrod straight, his shoulders broad beneath his white uniform, adorned with rows of ribbons, each with its own story of valor and service. The morning light from the large windows overlooking Chesapeake Bay cast him in an almost mythical glow, illuminating the power he wielded with effortless authority. His steel blue eyes assessed her coolly as he gestured to the chair across from him. On his desk lay an open folder, her personnel file. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, his voice a deep baritone honed by years of command. "Do you know why you're here?" "I believe so, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension coiling inside her chest. Harrington leaned back, fingers steepled before him. "The USS Constellation. An incident 3 days ago involving Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Blake." He paused, studying her face for any reaction. "Would you care to explain your version of events before I continue?" The memory surged forward, sharp and clear in her mind. The narrow corridor of the aircraft carrier had been dimly lit, the hum of machinery a constant background noise. Rebecca had been checking communication systems in a restricted area when she heard footsteps behind her. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Blake, son of Senator Charles Blake, a man whose influence reached the highest echelons of military funding, stepped too close, it alcohol heavy on his breath. "Working late, Lieutenant." His hand had settled on her lower back, then slid lower. Rebecca had moved away. "Sir, I need to finish these diagnostics." Blake had stepped closer again, blocking her exit. "Don't be so formal, we're alone down here." His hand reached for her again. What happened next had been pure instinct movements drilled into her through training. A precise SEER technique, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape taught to Navy SEALs. Her hands moved with practiced precision, gripping his wrist and twisting it into a joint lock that forced him to his knees. The crack of bone had been audible even over Blake's shout of pain. His personal Colt, A1, a World War II heirloom he carried despite regulations, had clattered to the deck floor, revealed when his jacket pulled open. She released him immediately, stepping back as he clutched his fractured wrist, his face contorted with pain and humiliation. "You'll regret this," he had snarled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." In Admiral Harrington's office, Rebecca kept her face neutral. "Lieutenant Colonel Blake approached me in a restricted area on the Constellation, sir. He made inappropriate advances. When he persisted after I asked him to stop, I defended myself using standard restraint techniques. I regret that his wrist was fractured in the process." Harrington's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He picked up a report from the desk. "Blake's account differs significantly. He claims you attacked him without provocation when he questioned your authorization to be in a secure area." He set down the paper. "He's filed formal charges with his father's connections." The unspoken implication hung in the air. Senator Blake's influence could crush a promising naval career without effort. "This isn't the first disciplinary issue in your record, Lieutenant." Harrington flipped through her file. "Insubordination during the RIMPAC exercise. A confrontation with Commander Wilson on the USS Nimitz. His eyes lifted to hers. A pattern of behavior that suggests difficulty with authority. Rebecca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Each incident had a story behind it. Sexist remarks, unfair treatment, obstacles placed in her path simply because she was a woman in what many still considered a man's navy. She had been one of the first women to graduate from the Naval Academy at Annapolis after it opened to women in 1976, but acceptance came slowly, if at all. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" she asked. Harrington nodded once. "Each incident in my record occurred when I was standing up for myself or others against improper conduct. I've never compromised a mission or disobeyed a lawful order." She paused, then added, "I believe my technical performance evaluations speak for themselves." The Admiral consulted her file again. "Top of your class in electronic warfare systems, identified a critical flaw in the ANSPS-49 radar code that no one else caught, prevented a potentially catastrophic failure during RIMPAC 88. He looked up. "Impressive technical skills don't excuse a lack of discipline, Lieutenant. A naval officer must control their emotions and respect the chain of command." His voice hardened. "That's not how we do things. Not in my Navy." The words stung more than they should have. Rebecca had given everything to the Navy. It was the only real home she'd ever known. She felt her composure beginning to crack, the weight of injustice pressing down on her. "With respect, sir, what would you have had me do?" "Let him continue." The question emerged more sharply than intended. Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Lieutenant." Something broke inside Rebecca, then the dam holding back years of careful restraint. Before she could reconsider, she stood, her movements deliberate and precise. "Sir, may I show you something?" Harrington's eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded. With steady hands, Rebecca untucked her uniform shirt and slowly raised it to reveal her ribcage. The office seemed to darken as she exposed what lay beneath the pristine uniform. Scars. Deep, jagged scars ran across her pale skin like cruel memories carved in flesh. Some were thin white lines, others raised and angry, despite the years. They told a story of systematic abuse, of pain, deliberately inflicted, of suffering no human should endure. Admiral Harrington's breath caught. His lips parted in shock, and for the first time in years, he fell utterly silent. Rebecca lowered her shirt, tucking it back in with military precision. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of steel. "I didn't get these serving my country, sir. I got them before I joined the Navy." The room felt suspended in time, the distant sounds of the naval base fading away. Harrington's face had lost its hardness, replaced by something Rebecca couldn't quite identify. "Sit down, Lieutenant," he said finally, his voice noticeably softer. She complied, maintaining her military bearing, despite the emotional storm inside her. "Tell me," he said simply. Rebecca looked past him, out the window where the vast Atlantic stretched toward the horizon, the same ocean that had given her the first true peace she'd ever known. "My father was a Korean War veteran with severe PTSD. She began, her voice steady. He brought the war home with him. Used his K-bar knife on me when the flashbacks were bad. Said he needed to toughen me up for the real world." The K-bar, standard issue for Marines, 7 inches of black-coated carbon steel, was designed to kill enemy combatants, not to terrorize children. The Admiral's jaw clenched as the implication settled. "My mother couldn't or wouldn't stop him. I ran away at 16, lived on the streets for 2 years. Her eyes refocused on Harrington. "I walked into a Navy recruiting office in San Diego on my 18th birthday. The recruiter looked at this skinny, homeless girl and saw nothing worth saving. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I convinced him otherwise." Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "The Navy gave me purpose, structure, freedom. The ocean gave me peace. For the first time, I belonged somewhere." Her voice hardened. "So when Lieutenant Colonel Blake put his hands on me, it wasn't just about regulations or propriety. I promised myself a long time ago that no one would ever hurt me like that again." Harrington's expression had transformed completely. The stern commander was gone, replaced by a man who suddenly looked every one of his 58 years. He rubbed a hand over his face. "You should not be here," he said quietly. Rebecca's spine stiffened, fire flashing in her eyes. "I earned my place here. Don't you dare tell me I don't belong." Harrington raised his hand in a calming gesture. That's not what I meant, Lieutenant. I meant no one should have to come into my Navy carrying scars like that. No one should have to fight battles outside before fighting them within our ranks. The unexpected compassion caught Rebecca off guard. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, revealing the vulnerability she worked so hard to conceal. Harrington stood walking to the window. His reflection overlaid the harbor view, a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. I have a daughter, he said unexpectedly. About your age. Emily. He paused. The thought of anyone doing that to her. His voice trailed off, but the tightening of his fists completed the sentiment. He turned back to face her. Lieutenant, your technical skills and dedication are exceptional. Your instinct to protect yourself is not wrong. He sighed. But the Navy operates on discipline and procedure. There are channels for reporting harassment, protocols that must be followed. With all due respect, sir, those channels often protect men like Blake more than women like me. The words were out before she could stop them. Surprisingly, Harrington didn't rebuke her. Instead, he nodded slowly. You may be right, but breaking a superior officer's wrist, regardless of provocation, has consequences. Rebecca squared her shoulders, prepared for the worst. Her career, the life she'd built, the security she'd fought for, all hanging in the balance. However, Harrington continued, given Blake's unauthorized weapon and the inconsistencies in his report, I believe a full investigation is warranted before any disciplinary action. Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered in Rebecca's chest. The Admiral returned to his desk, closing her file with finality. Report back to your duties for now, Lieutenant. I'll handle Blake and his father. Rebecca stood, saluting crisply. Thank you, sir. As she turned to leave, something made her pause. The weight of a secret she'd carried for years pressed against her conscience. In the new light of understanding between them, perhaps it was time. Sir, she said quietly, there's something else you should know. Harrington looked up, questioning. Rebecca took a deep breath, the words almost a whisper. I knew your wife. The Admiral froze, his face transforming from professional composure to shocked disbelief in an instant. What did you just say? His voice was barely controlled, teetering between whisper and shout. Elizabeth Harrington. Rebecca's voice grew steadier. We were friends at Stanford before I dropped out. She was the only real friend I ever had. The office seemed to darken as the sun dipped behind a cloud, casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the first lights of the harbor began to twinkle across Chesapeake Bay, but inside, time stood suspended between one heartbeat and the next. Admiral Harrington's face had drained of color. He gripped the edge of his desk as if it were the only solid thing in a world, suddenly turned liquid beneath his feet. That's impossible, he said finally, but doubt had already crept into his voice. Rebecca reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew an envelope worn thin with handling, the paper softened by years. She wrote to me many times. I kept every letter. She placed the envelope on his desk. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, elegant cursive that William Harrington would recognize anywhere. His wife's handwriting. Elizabeth's handwriting. How? The single word contained a universe of questions. We met in Philosophy 101, fall semester 1980. I was there on scholarship. Rebecca's eyes grew distant with memory. She was brilliant, kind. Saw something in me worth knowing when no one else did. A soft smile touched her lips. She used to bring me coffee before exams. Said it was because I looked like I needed it, but really she just wanted to make sure I showed up. Harrington sank slowly back into his chair, eyes fixed on the envelope. Why didn't she ever mention you? I disappeared, Rebecca admitted, shame coloring her words. When the scholarship money ran out, I couldn't stay. Didn't say goodbye. Just vanished. It was easier that way. She swallowed hard. But Elizabeth kept writing, sending letters to my last known address. Somehow they found me, following me from port to port as I moved through training and assignments. The Admiral's fingers hovered over the envelope, not quite touching it, as if it might disintegrate under his fingertips. Elizabeth died 3 years ago, he said, his voice hollow. Car accident. I know. Rebecca's voice softened. The last letter came just a week before. October 7th, 1986. Harrington looked up sharply. You remember the exact date? Some dates burn themselves into your memory, sir. Rebecca met his gaze steadily, like the day you lose someone who truly saw you. Outside, the naval base continued its eternal rhythm, sailors changing shifts, aircraft landing on distant carriers, submarines, slipping silently beneath the waves. But in this office, the world had narrowed to two people connected by an invisible thread, a woman neither of them had been able to save. "Why tell me this now?" Harrington asked finally. Rebecca considered the question carefully. "Because secrets have weight, Admiral. They press down on you until you can hardly breathe." She straightened her shoulders. "And because Elizabeth would have wanted us to know each other." The Admiral opened his desk drawer and withdrew a silver frame, turning it so Rebecca could see. Elizabeth Harrington smiled back, auburn hair, bright eyes filled with intelligence and warmth. The same smile Rebecca remembered from college hallways a lifetime ago. "She was everything to me," Harrington said quietly. "Her death, it wasn't right. Something about it never felt right." Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "What do you mean, sir?" The Admiral seemed to catch himself shaking his head. "Another time, perhaps." He stood signaling the end of their conversation. "Thank you for telling me, Lieutenant. Report back tomorrow morning at 0800. We have matters to discuss regarding Lieutenant Colonel Blake." Rebecca saluted crisply, but as she turned to leave, Harrington spoke again. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "Elizabeth had excellent judgment in people. She always did." Their eyes met across the room. "Perhaps I should have remembered that today." As Rebecca walked through the corridors of the naval base, the weight of the past hour pressed upon her. She had revealed more of herself to Admiral Harrington than she had to anyone in years, her scars, both physical and emotional, her connection to his late wife, her vulnerabilities beneath the carefully constructed armor of military discipline. The setting sun cast long shadows across the parade grounds, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. In the distance, the American flag fluttered against the darkening sky, its stars and stripes a reminder of what they all served, what they all protected. Rebecca paused at the edge of the pier, watching as a destroyer returned to port, sailors lining the rails in their dress whites. The sight had always filled her with pride, the precision, the tradition, the sense of belonging to something greater than herself. The Navy had saved her, given her purpose when she had nothing else. Now, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to hope. Not just for her career or for justice against Blake, but for something she had almost forgotten existed: human connection. The possibility that someone might see beyond her rank and reputation to the person beneath. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared over the Atlantic, Rebecca Mitchell straightened her uniform and turned back toward the base. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it as she had faced everything in her life, with determination, courage, and the silent strength of someone who had survived the worst and lived to tell the tale. The ghosts of the past, her father's cruelty, the streets of San Diego, Elizabeth's death, would always walk with her. But perhaps, just perhaps, she no longer had to walk with them alone. The night closed in around Norfolk Naval Station, shrouding its secrets in darkness. But darkness, as Rebecca knew all too well, was often where the most important truths came to light, and some truths, once revealed, could never be hidden again. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect Virginia day that made even the austere naval architecture seem almost welcoming. Rebecca arrived at Admiral Harrington's office precisely at 0800 uniform, immaculate composure restored after a night of restless sleep. Her knuckles had barely touched the door when his voice called for her to enter. This time, the office felt different, the morning light softer, the air less charged with tension. Or perhaps it was simply that the ground between them had shifted territories of trust, cautiously mapped during yesterday's revelations. Admiral Harrington stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, as he gazed out at the naval yard. He turned as she entered, his face composed but somehow more accessible than before. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he greeted her, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." As Rebecca took her seat, she noticed a small stack of letters on the desk between them, her letters from Elizabeth removed from their envelopes, carefully arranged. The sight of them sent a jolt through her chest. "I read them," Harrington said, answering her unasked question. "All 27 of them. Stayed up most of the night." His voice carried the weight of sleeplessness, but his eyes were clear-focused. "Elizabeth wrote about you often in her journals. Rebecca Mitchell, the brilliant girl who disappeared. She wondered what happened to you for years." Rebecca's throat tightened. "I should have answered her letters. Should have let her know I was all right." "Why didn't you?" The question held no accusation, only curiosity. Shame at first, Rebecca admitted, dropping out, failing at what she thought I could achieve. Her fingers unconsciously traced the edge of the desk. Then time passed and it seemed too late, the gap too wide to bridge. She met his gaze. I kept every letter, though. Read them until the pages started wearing thin. Harrington nodded, understanding. Elizabeth had that effect on people. She saw potential others missed. He sat down across from her, resting his forearms on the desk. In her last letter to you, she mentioned I'd been promoted to admiral. Said I might be able to help you. Rebecca's eyes fell to the letter in question, October 7, 1986. Yes, sir. She also mentioned something else. Harrington's voice lowered slightly. Something about the Blake family, about concerns she had. He selected one particular letter. I've come across something disturbing about Senator Blake's activities, she wrote. Bill doesn't know yet, but I'm gathering evidence. Rebecca's breath caught. I remember that part. I always wondered what she meant. 1 week after writing this, my wife's car went off Chesapeake Bay Bridge. No skid marks, no witnesses. Harrington's face hardened. The official report said brake failure, accident, case closed. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Sir, are you suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything, Lieutenant. Not yet. Harrington leaned back. What I am doing is reassessing the complaint against you in light of new information. He withdrew a different file from his drawer. Lieutenant Colonel Blake's service record contains several redacted disciplinary incidents. Female personnel suddenly requesting transfers after serving under his command. Complaints that mysteriously disappear. Rebecca wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still burned like acid. As for his unauthorized Colt M1911A1, Harrington continued, that's a clear violation of protocol regardless of its status as a family heirloom. The weapon has been confiscated as evidence. He closed the file with finality. I've declined to forward Blake's complaint to the JAG office. Instead, I've initiated a counter-investigation into his conduct aboard the Constellation. Relief washed over Rebecca like a physical force, nearly buckling her knees even while seated. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Lieutenant. Harrington's expression grew serious. Lieutenant Colonel Blake comes from power and privilege. His father sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee, controlling much of our funding. They won't take this lying down. Rebecca straightened in her chair. I understand the risks, sir. Good, because I'm about to increase them significantly. Harrington slid a folder across the desk to her classified markings stamped across its cover. I'm assigning you to a special project, codename Pathfinder. Rebecca opened the folder cautiously. Inside were reports of missing Syntel encryption devices on highly classified technology used in nuclear communications. These devices have been disappearing during transport between naval bases and Pentagon facilities. Harrington explained, top secret encryption technology potentially in unknown hands. Rebecca scanned the technical specifications with growing alarm. The Syntel system utilized RSA 512 encryption algorithms, cutting-edge technology that formed the backbone of America's most sensitive communications. If these fell into Soviet hands, she began. That's the concerning part, Harrington interrupted. Intelligence suggests they're not going to the Soviets. KGB has an operation Operatia Dyatlov, the woodpecker operation, actively seeking these devices, but someone else is getting to them first. Rebecca flipped through transport logs, security reports, inventory discrepancies, a pattern emerging through the bureaucratic documentation. Every missing shipment has one common factor, she noted, looking up. Lieutenant Colonel Blake was present for each transport authorization. Precisely. Harrington's eyes gleamed with approval at her quick analysis. I need someone with both technical expertise and... He paused. Personal motivation to investigate discreetly. Why me, sir? Surely Naval Intelligence or NCIS. I don't know how far this goes or who might be involved. Harrington lowered his voice. This isn't about your technical skills, Lieutenant, though they're impressive. I'm giving you this assignment because Elizabeth trusted you. His eyes bore into hers. And because someone who's survived what you have knows how to fight when cornered. Rebecca absorbed his words, understanding the unspoken message. This wasn't just an investigation, it was dangerous, potentially career-ending for both of them if it went wrong. "I'm giving you this opportunity not because of Elizabeth," Harrington said, echoing her thoughts. "I'm giving it to you because I need someone who isn't afraid to face the truth no matter how ugly it might be." Rebecca closed the folder. Decision made. "When do I start?" "Immediately. You'll be temporarily reassigned to my staff for a communication systems review. That gives you access to classified areas and transportation logs without raising suspicion." He stood signaling the end of their meeting. "Report your findings directly to me, no one else. Trust no one." As Rebecca rose to leave, folder tucked securely under her arm, Harrington added one final comment. "Lieutenant Mitchell, be careful. If my suspicions are correct, we're dealing with something far bigger than one privileged officer's bad behavior. Elizabeth may have stumbled onto something that got her killed." The weight of his words settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't just about justice for herself anymore. It was about justice for Elizabeth, the friend she'd abandoned, the woman who'd never stopped believing in her. "I won't let you down, sir," she said, the promise extending beyond the Admiral to the memory of the woman who had connected them. As the door closed behind Lieutenant Mitchell, Admiral William Harrington turned back to the window, gazing out at the naval base sprawling before him. 29 years of service from ensign to admiral. He'd fought in classified operations from Cuba to Cambodia, commanded vessels from destroyers to carrier groups, navigated the treacherous waters of Pentagon politics. But nothing in his distinguished career had prepared him for the possibility that his wife's death was no accident, or that the key to uncovering the truth might lie with a scarred lieutenant who carried more strength in her damaged body than most men carried in their unbroken ones. He picked up the photo of Elizabeth again, tracing her smile with a weathered finger. "I should have asked more questions 3 years ago," he whispered to the empty office. "I won't make that mistake again." Outside, the American flag snapped in the Atlantic breeze, its stars and stripes a reminder of the oaths they'd all sworn to protect country and constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. Some enemies, Harrington reflected grimly, wore the same uniform you did. And some battles began with showing your scars to someone brave enough to see them for what they truly were, not signs of weakness, but medals of survival. The classified documents from Operation Pathfinder lay spread across Rebecca's small desk in her temporary office near Admiral Harrington's command center. 3 days into her investigation, patterns were emerging from the sea of bureaucratic paperwork, transportation logs, security clearances, personnel rotations. She had plotted each missing Sintel device on a map of the eastern seaboard, triangulating locations and personnel involved. Every disappearance had Lieutenant Colonel Blake's fingerprints, sometimes literally his signature, authorizing a security protocol changed just days before a shipment vanished. His presence noted in visitor logs at secure facilities, his name on travel orders to the same locations where devices disappeared. Rebecca rubbed her tired eyes. The fluorescent lights of the windowless room cast harsh shadows across the documents, classified stamps bleeding red like wounds across white paper. She reached for her coffee, cold now, but still necessary as she studied the technical specifications of the TAC-Intel system. The RSA 512 encryption algorithm represented the cutting edge of American cryptographic technology. In the wrong hands, it could compromise the entire nuclear command and control structure. The thought sent ice through her veins. This wasn't just theft, it was potential catastrophe. A knock at her door jolted her from concentration. She quickly covered the classified materials with a mundane systems report before calling enter. Lieutenant James Cooper stepped inside, a communications specialist from Harrington's staff, 32, sandy-haired with an easy manner that belied his sharp intelligence. He had been assigned to assist with her communications review, a cover story she maintained carefully. "Working late again, Lieutenant?" Cooper raised an eyebrow. "The Admiral runs a tight ship, but even he believes in sleep occasionally." Rebecca offered a professional smile. "Just finishing up, Cooper." She gestured vaguely at the visible report. "The ANSPS-49 calibration data needs review before tomorrow's brief." Cooper nodded, though his eyes lingered on the corner of a classified folder peeking out from beneath the report. If he recognized it, he didn't comment. "Some of us are heading to O'Malley's. You're welcome to join." He leaned against the doorframe. "Might help with the integration into the Admiral's team." Rebecca considered the invitation. Trust no one, Harrington had warned. But isolation made her conspicuous, and intelligence gathering happened in social settings as often as in secure rooms. "Give me 20 minutes to wrap this up," she said. After Cooper left, Rebecca carefully locked the classified materials in her safe, mentally cataloging what remained to be analyzed. Blake's pattern was clear, but she still hadn't identified his contacts or the ultimate destination of the stolen technology. More importantly, she hadn't found anything connecting the thefts to Elizabeth Harrington's death. The thought of Elizabeth's letters, carefully preserved through years and military reassignments, brought a familiar ache. Rebecca had never answered them yet. Elizabeth had continued writing, reaching across the void Rebecca had created. Now those letters might contain clues to a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. O'Malley's Pub sat just outside the naval base gates, a well-worn establishment where generations of sailors had sought respite from the rigid discipline of military life. Wood-paneled walls displayed naval memorabilia, faded photographs of warships, tarnished brass instruments, frayed signal flags. The air smelled of beer and fried food, comforting in its predictability. Cooper waved from a corner booth where he sat with three other officers from Harrington's command staff. Rebecca threaded her way through the crowded room, nodding to familiar faces while maintaining a professional distance. "Mitchell, glad you made it," Cooper said, shifting to make room. "Everyone, Lieutenant Rebecca Mitchell, the Admiral's new communications specialist. Mitchell, meet Lieutenants Walker Rodriguez and Commander Phillips." Rebecca exchanged handshakes and pleasantries, noting Phillips's position as Harrington's chief of staff. At 45, Phillips had the weathered look of a career naval officer, salt and pepper hair, cropped regulation short eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that conveyed authority. "So Mitchell," Phillips said after they'd settled with drinks, "the Admiral pulled you from the Constellation rather suddenly. Must have been quite the impression you made." The careful phrasing wasn't lost on Rebecca. News traveled fast in naval circles, but the full story of her confrontation with Blake had been contained, at least officially. "The Admiral needed someone with specific technical expertise," she replied neutrally. "I happen to fit the parameters." Phillips studied her over the rim of his glass. "Interesting timing given the incident with Lieutenant Colonel Blake." The table tensed slightly. Rodriguez and Walker exchanged glances. "I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel matters, Commander," Rebecca said, her voice level but firm. Cooper cleared his throat. "Speaking of personnel, did anyone hear about the shakeup at Naval Intelligence, Captain Harris being reassigned after 20 years in cryptographic security?" The conversation shifted, but Rebecca noted how Phillips continued watching her. The commander was testing her, probing for weaknesses or inconsistencies. She filed the interaction away for later analysis, maintaining her cover while gathering impressions of Harrington's inner circle. As the evening progressed, Rebecca carefully extracted information while revealing little. Rodriguez mentioned budget cuts affecting TAC-Intel production. Walker complained about increased security protocols at Norfolk's communications center. Cooper discussed upcoming war games involving nuclear command simulations. Each comment, seemingly innocuous, added pieces to her mental puzzle. Phillips excused himself shortly after 9, citing an early meeting. As he stood, he placed a heavy hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "The Admiral doesn't make personnel decisions lightly, Lieutenant. If he's placed his confidence in you, there's reason." His grip tightened fractionally. "Don't disappoint him. He's had enough disappointments lately." After Phillips departed, the conversation relaxed noticeably. Cooper leaned closer to Rebecca. "Don't mind Phillips," he said quietly. "He's been protective of the Admiral since Mrs. Harrington passed. They served together for nearly 20 years. Rebecca nodded, filing away this connection. "Were they close, the Admiral and his wife?" Cooper's expression softened. "Inseparable. Her death devastated him. The accident happened while he was deployed. It couldn't even get back for 3 days. Phillips was the one who had to tell him over secure comms." He shook his head. "Never seen a stronger man so broken. Took months before he was himself again, if he ever truly was." The information stirred something in Rebecca's mind. Elizabeth's last letter had been dated October 7, 1986, exactly 1 week before her death. If Harrington had been deployed, then he wouldn't have received the USB drive she'd sent him until after she died. "When did the Admiral return from that deployment?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Cooper frowned, thinking. "Mid-October 86, I believe." The Eisenhower carrier group in the Mediterranean. Operation Attain document one of the Libya engagements. Rebecca's pulse quickened. If Harrington had been at sea when Elizabeth discovered whatever she'd found about the Blakes, who else might she have confided in? As the evening wound down, Rebecca made her excuses and headed back toward the base, her mind racing with new connections. The cool night air cleared her thoughts as she walked streetlights, casting long shadows across the pavement. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she nearly missed the dark sedan parked half a block from her barracks engine off, but occupied. Military instinct made her notice the silhouette of a driver watching the building entrance. When she altered her course slightly, the engine started. Rebecca maintained her pace but shifted her route, cutting between buildings instead of taking the main walkway. The sedan pulled forward, keeping pace on the parallel street. Not subtle but effective, a warning, not an immediate threat. She reached into her pocket, fingers closing around her keys, positioned between her knuckles, a simple but effective improvised weapon. 3 years on the streets had taught her to never be completely defenseless. As she approached her barracks from the rear entrance, the sedan accelerated, circling the block to cut her off. Rebecca stopped beneath the shadow of an oak tree, assessing her options. Base security was within shouting distance, but involving them would expose her investigation. The sedan slowed as it approached passenger window, lowering. Rebecca tensed, preparing for confrontation. "Lieutenant Mitchell." The voice from within was familiar, though she couldn't immediately place it. "I believe we have a mutual interest in Lieutenant Colonel Blake's activities." A face leaned toward the open window. Naval Intelligence Captain Martin Harris, the recently reassigned cryptographic security officer Cooper had mentioned earlier. "Captain Harris," Rebecca acknowledged, maintaining her distance. "This is an unusual approach for a conversation." "These are unusual circumstances, Lieutenant." Harris's voice was low, urgent. "I know what you're investigating. I know about the Tassintel devices, and I know why Elizabeth Harrington died." The mention of Elizabeth's name hit Rebecca like physical blow. She glanced around, ensuring they weren't observed. "I think you should get in, Lieutenant," Harris said, "before Blake's people realize we're talking." The safe house was modest, a small apartment in a nondescript building in Virginia Beach, 20 minutes from the base. No military touches, nothing to suggest its connection to naval intelligence operations. Captain Harris moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to covert meetings, checking windows, securing doors, sweeping for surveillance devices with a handheld scanner. "We're clear," he said, finally gesturing for Rebecca to sit at the small dining table. "Though I don't know how long that will last." Rebecca remained standing, studying the man before her. Captain Harris was in his late 50s, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes, his bearing unmistakably military despite the casual attire. His face showed the strain of recent events. Deep lines around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw. "You mentioned Elizabeth Harrington," she said. "Before I listen to anything else, I need to know how you're connected to her death." Harris nodded, seemingly approving of her caution. "Direct, good." He opened a cabinet and removed a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. "Drink." When Rebecca declined, he poured one for himself. "I was Elizabeth's contact at Naval Intelligence. When she discovered irregularities in Senator Blake's Defense Appropriations Committee activities, she came to me instead of going through official channels." He took a long swallow of bourbon. "She was smart, knew that Blake's influence meant standard procedures might be compromised. We started building a case, gathering evidence of defense contract manipulation, classified information leaks, technology transfers to unauthorized parties." "The Tassintel devices," Rebecca said. Harris nodded. "Part of it. Senator Blake had been steering contracts, arranging for security loopholes, facilitating the extraction of sensitive technology. His son, Lieutenant Colonel Blake, was the inside man, military credentials opening doors civilian contractors couldn't access." Rebecca thought of the pattern she'd found in the disappearances. "But they weren't selling to the Soviets." "No." Harris's face darkened. "Something potentially worse. A group called Octagon, former intelligence officers, defense contractors, political operators. People who believe they know better than elected officials how national security should function." He finished his drink, setting the glass down with precision. "They're positioning themselves for the post-Cold War world, Lieutenant. The Berlin Wall is crumbling. The Soviet Union is collapsing. They see a power vacuum forming and intend to control who fills it." Rebecca processed this information, connecting it with her findings. And Elizabeth discovered this. More than discovered it. She had proof financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies, communications protocols, established outside official channels, names of military and intelligence personnel involved. Harris's voice tightened. She was preparing to take everything to the FBI the day after she died. The implications settled over Rebecca like a physical weight. "You're saying her accident wasn't an accident?" "Her brake lines were cut," Harris said flatly. "Professional job nearly undetectable. The investigation was closed quickly, pressure from above to rule it an accident. By the time I raised concerns, evidence had disappeared, witnesses couldn't be located, case files were sealed." Rebecca's thoughts turned to the USB drive Harrington had mentioned. "She sent something to the Admiral before she died, a drive he couldn't access." Harris's eyebrows rose. "She never mentioned that to me." He considered this new information. Elizabeth was brilliant with encryption theoretical mathematics background before she married Harrington. If she created a secure backup, "The Admiral gave it to me to decode," Rebecca admitted. "I haven't had time to work on it yet." Harris leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "That drive might contain everything we need, Lieutenant. Names, dates, operations, the entire Octagon network." His eyes met hers. "It might also explain why you've been targeted." Rebecca stiffened. "Targeted? Your confrontation with Blake wasn't coincidence. Your transfer to Harrington's command raised flags. Now your investigation into the Tassintel thefts, you're touching the same network Elizabeth discovered." Harris's expression grew grave. "They're watching you, Lieutenant, just as they watched her." The parallels sent a chill through Rebecca's core. She thought of the dark sedan, the warning it represented. Not subtle, but effective. "Why were you reassigning Captain?" she asked. Harris gave a bitter smile. "Official reason, routine rotation." Reality I kept pushing about the Tassintel disappearances, kept asking questions about security protocols being changed. 3 weeks ago, my security clearance was reviewed. 2 weeks ago, I was informed of my transfer to a listening post in Alaska. He shrugged. "I decided to take leave instead, unofficially." Rebecca understood the implication. Harris had gone off the grid, operating without authorization, pursuing an investigation his superiors had buried. "Why come to me?" she asked. "Why not go directly to the Admiral?" "Because I don't know who to trust anymore," Harris admitted. "Octagon has penetrated multiple levels of command. Harrington's position makes him visible. They'll be watching his direct communications, monitoring his movements." He studied her carefully. "But you're new, unknown, operating under cover of a systems review. You might be able to access what I can't." Rebecca considered her options. Harris's story aligned with her findings, filled gaps in the patterns she'd identified. But trusting him represented a significant risk to her investigation, to Harrington, to herself. "I need verification," she said finally. "Something that proves your connection to Elizabeth, that confirms what you've told me." Harris nodded, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew a photograph, Elizabeth Harrington standing beside him at what appeared to be a naval function, both smiling at the camera. "Cryptographic Security Conference, Annapolis, 1985, he explained. "We presented a joint paper on communication vulnerabilities in naval deployment protocols." That's where she first noticed Senator Blake's unusual interest in technical specifications he shouldn't have been concerned with. Rebecca studied the photograph. Elizabeth looked just as she remembered, warm smile, intelligent eyes, elegant posture. The sight brought a flood of memories, late-night study sessions, shared coffees, conversations about philosophy and purpose. A friendship she had abandoned, but never forgotten. "There's more," Harris said, producing a small notebook. "Elizabeth's notes on Blake's activities, dates, and locations that correspond with Tassintel disappearances. I've kept it secured away from official channels." Rebecca examined the notebook, recognizing Elizabeth's handwriting from her letters. The entries were coded, not obviously encrypted, but organized in a system only meaningful to the writer. Dates, locations, alphanumeric sequences that likely represented serial numbers or security clearances. "I need time," Rebecca said, closing the notebook. "Time to verify, to decode the USB, to complete my investigation." "Time is the one thing we don't have, Lieutenant." Harris's expression hardened. "Blake knows you're investigating. Octagon will be moving assets, covering tracks, eliminating loose ends." He checked his watch. "I have a contact at the FBI, someone outside military channels, someone I trust. We need to move on this within 48 hours before they realize how much we know." Rebecca thought of Harrington, of the trust he'd placed in her, the connection they shared through Elizabeth. Going outside their chain of command involving the FBI without his knowledge, it violated everything she'd promised him. "I report to Admiral Harrington," she said firmly. "I'll bring him this information. Let him decide next steps." Harris's expression darkened. "And if he's compromised, if his judgment is clouded by personal connection, if Octagon is monitoring his communications, then I'll deal with those consequences." Rebecca replied, her tone allowing no argument. "But I won't betray his trust, not when it's taken so much to earn it." The captain studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Elizabeth said the same thing about him once, that his trust once earned was worth any risk to maintain." He sighed. "You have 24 hours, Lieutenant. After that, I'm contacting the FBI regardless. Too much is at stake." As Rebecca prepared to leave, Harris handed her a secure pager. "If you need me, enter code 3796. I'll find you." His eyes met hers with grim intensity. "And Lieutenant, watch your back." Elizabeth thought she was being careful too. The base seemed different when Rebecca returned. Shadows deeper, sounds sharper, familiar landmarks. Suddenly unfamiliar. Her encounter with Harris had transformed her investigation from historical analysis to immediate threat. Octagon wasn't just a nebulous conspiracy, it was an active, present danger. She moved with heightened awareness, scanning rooflines, noting vehicles, cataloging personnel who seemed out of place. The weight of her service pistol secured in her quarters felt suddenly significant in its absence. Rebecca entered her barracks through a side entrance, climbing stairs rather than using the elevator, approaching her door obliquely to check for signs of intrusion. Nothing obvious, no scratches around the lock, no disturbance to the nearly invisible thread she'd placed across the bottom corner of the doorframe. Inside, she secured the door and conducted a thorough sweep for surveillance devices. Finding none, she retrieved Elizabeth's USB drive from its hiding place within a hollowed-out technical manual. The drive was old technology by current standards, one of the first-generation USB devices with minimal storage capacity. Its age presented both challenge and opportunity. Modern decryption tools might not recognize its formatting, but neither would modern security systems be designed to prevent its access. Rebecca connected it to her personal laptop rather than her government-issued computer. If the drive contained what Harris suggested, evidence implicating high-ranking officials in conspiracy and possibly murder, accessing it on a monitored system would be tantamount to suicide. The drive mounted after several attempts, displaying a single encrypted file with a simple text interface. Visionaire protocol active. Authentication required. Rebecca felt a surge of recognition. During their time at Stanford, she and Elizabeth had developed a shared encryption system based on the centuries-old Visionaire cipher, a passion project combining Elizabeth's mathematical brilliance with Rebecca's practical coding skills. They had named it the Dickinson Protocol, after Emily Dickinson, whose poetry they'd used as encryption keys. The memory surfaced with crystal clarity, Elizabeth laughing as they created increasingly complex variations, testing them against each other's decryption attempts. "Simplicity, hiding complexity," Elizabeth had said. "The best security isn't impenetrable walls, but doors that only the right people know how to open." Rebecca's fingers hovered over the keyboard. What poem would Elizabeth have chosen as key? Something personal, meaningful to both of them. She began typing. "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves in immortality." The system processed her input characters, shifting algorithms running. Then authentication failed. Rebecca frowned. Wrong poem. She tried again, selecting another Dickinson verse they had often discussed. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." Again, failure. Rebecca closed her eyes, thinking back to late-night conversations in Stanford dormitories, philosophical debates over coffee letters received in naval barracks across the world. What verse would Elizabeth have chosen specifically for her? The answer came suddenly, not Dickinson at all, but Shakespeare from a dog-eared volume Elizabeth had given her before she left Stanford. "And this our life exempt from public haunt finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything." The screen flickered, characters transforming, and then authentication, successful decryption initiating. The file opened, revealing dozens of documents, financial records, meeting transcripts, security clearance, authorizations, personnel lists. At the top, a simple text document titled Read me Rebecca.text. Rebecca opened it, heart pounding. Rebecca, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. These files contain evidence of a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military and government administration. A group calling themselves Octagon is systematically extracting classified technology, particularly encryption systems, positioning themselves for control in the post-Soviet world. The TASS Intel devices are only part of their operation. They've compromised communication systems across all branches, created backdoors into nuclear command, protocols established shadow networks outside official channels. Senator Charles Blake leads their military acquisition division. His son Stephen executes the actual thefts and transfers. Captain Martin Harris at Naval Intelligence has been helping me compile this evidence. Trust him if you can find him. I haven't told Bill yet, can't risk his position until we have enough evidence. I'm meeting with an FBI contact tomorrow. After that, I'll tell him everything. I'm sorry I never heard back from you all these years, but I never stopped believing in you. Bill can help you now, as I always knew he could. If anything happens to me, promise you'll finish this. With love and faith always, Elizabeth. Rebecca stared at the screen, Elizabeth's words reaching across years and beyond death. A final request from the friend she had abandoned. The weight of it pressed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She began examining the other files, detailed records of tax intel thefts, communication intercepts, financial transactions through offshore accounts. Names appeared repeatedly: Blake father and son, Phillips Harrington's chief of staff, officials at the Pentagon State Department intelligence agencies. One document contained operational details for something called Compass Rose, a planned technology transfer to unnamed foreign buyers scheduled for next week. The location was familiar, a secure storage facility at Norfolk where several TAC-Intel devices were currently held. Rebecca checked the time, nearly midnight. She needed to bring this information to Harrington immediately, regardless of the hour. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and time-sensitive. Octagon wasn't just stealing technology. They were planning to sell it, compromising national security for profit and power. As she prepared to disconnect the drive, a new message appeared on her screen. Remote access detected, security protocol activated. Rebecca's blood turned cold. Someone was attempting to access her computer remotely, tracking the decryption of Elizabeth's files. She immediately disconnected the USB drive and powered down her laptop, mind racing. The room suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. If they had tracked her digital footprint, they knew she had accessed the files. Knowledge that had gotten Elizabeth killed. A soft click from the hallway confirmed her fears, the sound of a keycard being used on her door. Not base security, they would have knocked, announced themselves. Rebecca moved swiftly, silently. She slipped the USB drive into her pocket, grabbed her service pistol from its secure drawer, and positioned herself beside the door, back against the wall. The door opened slowly, light from the hallway casting a long shadow across the floor. A figure stepped inside, male, military bearing, hand reaching inside his jacket. Rebecca's combat training took over. In one fluid movement, she struck the intruder's extended arm with a precise blow, redirecting his reach while simultaneously sweeping his forward leg. He stumbled, caught off balance as she applied pressure to his wrist, forcing him to release his weapon, a silenced pistol that clattered to the floor. "Don't move," she ordered, her own weapon now pressed against the base of his skull. "Hands where I can see them." The intruder complied, raising his hands slowly. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, voice calm despite his position. "I believe we have a misunderstanding." Rebecca recognized him instantly, Commander Phillips Harrington's chief of staff, the man who had served with the Admiral for 20 years, the man whose name had appeared in Elizabeth's files as an Octagon operative. "No misunderstanding, Commander," she replied, keeping her weapon steady. "I know exactly why you're here." Phillips remained unnaturally calm. "You've accessed information you don't understand, Lieutenant. Information that poses a significant national security risk if misinterpreted. Is that what you told Elizabeth Harrington before you arranged her accident?" Rebecca's voice was ice. A slight tensing of Phillips' shoulders confirmed her suspicion. "Elizabeth made unfortunate assumptions based on incomplete information, as you're doing now. Complete enough to identify you as an Octagon asset, complete enough to detail your involvement in the TASS Intel thefts, complete enough to expose Compass Rose. At the mention of Compass Rose, Philip's composure slipped momentarily. You have no idea what you're interfering with, Lieutenant. No concept of the larger purpose these operations serve. I understand treason, Commander. I understand conspiracy and murder. Philip sighed as if dealing with a subordinate who failed to grasp a simple concept. You've shown remarkable skills, Lieutenant. Octagon could use someone with your technical expertise and survival instincts. There's a place for you in what comes next, a better place than the Navy has offered you. The recruitment attempt confirmed everything Elizabeth Bolanos had indicated. Octagon was positioning for power, consolidating assets, eliminating threats. I need to take you to people who can explain properly, Phillips continued. People who understand the real threats facing our nation now that the Soviet Union is collapsing. The old order is dying, Lieutenant. What replaces it depends on people willing to act decisively. Rebecca pressed the gun more firmly against his neck. The only place you're going is into custody. Admiral Harrington will be very interested in what you have to say about his wife's death. Phillips went still. Harrington can never know. It would destroy him. Everything he believes about duty, about service, it would break him completely. He deserves the truth, Rebecca insisted. The truth. Phillips laughed softly, bitterly. The truth is Harrington is a good man in a world where good men are becoming obsolete. The truth is Elizabeth died because she couldn't see the bigger picture, couldn't understand necessary sacrifices. The truth is you'll die too, Lieutenant, if you follow her path. Before Rebecca could respond, the hallway erupted with activity. Heavy footsteps shouted commands, the unmistakable sound of military police. Phillips tensed options, visibly calculating behind his eyes. Last chance, Lieutenant. Come with me now or face what follows. Rebecca's response was immediate and absolute. I choose Admiral Harrington. The door burst open, military police flooding the room, weapons drawn. Leading them was Lieutenant Cooper, expression grim, as he took in the scene, Rebecca holding a gun on Harrington's chief of staff. Lieutenant Mitchell, Cooper said formally, secure your weapon. Rebecca maintained her position. Commander Phillips entered my quarters unauthorized, armed with a silenced weapon. Check the floor beside him. Cooper signaled one of the MPs, who retrieved the silenced pistol with a gloved hand. The evidence was undeniable, but Phillips showed no concern. This is a misunderstanding, Phillips stated calmly. Lieutenant Mitchell has been acting erratically, making unfounded accusations. I came to check on her welfare after concerning reports from base security. With a silenced weapon, Rebecca challenged, after attempting remote access of my computer, after participating in the theft of classified TACintel devices. Cooper looked between them, clearly struggling with the implications. Phillips was Harrington's most trusted officer, his right hand for decades. Rebecca was a recent addition with a history of disciplinary issues. Both of you will come with us, Cooper decided finally. Admiral Harrington will sort this out. As the military police secured them, Phillips leaned close to Rebecca, voice low enough that only she could hear. You have no idea what you've started, Lieutenant. No idea at all. Rebecca met his gaze unflinchingly. I know exactly what I've done, Commander. I've kept a promise to a friend. Phillips smiled, then a cold expression devoid of humor or humanity. Then you'll share her fate. As they were led from the barracks into the night, Rebecca felt the weight of the USB drive in her pocket. Elizabeth's final testament, her unfinished mission. Somewhere in the darkness, Octagon was watching their carefully constructed conspiracy beginning to unravel. Dawn was still hours away, but for Rebecca Mitchell, the longest night of her life had only just begun. The secure interrogation room in the basement of Norfolk Naval Station's administration building felt like a tomb. Windowless, soundproofed walls painted institutional gray, a single metal table bolted to the floor, two chairs facing each other in silent opposition. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system recycling stale air through invisible ducts. Rebecca Mitchell sat rigidly in one chair, her service uniform wrinkled from the hours she'd spent in custody. The USB drive with Elizabeth's evidence remained hidden, tucked into a small tear she'd made in the lining of her uniform jacket while being transported. A desperate gamble. If they searched her thoroughly, she'd lose everything. The door opened with a metallic clang. Admiral William Harrington entered, closing it behind him with deliberate care. His face betrayed nothing as he placed a folder on the table and took the seat opposite her. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of accusation, evidence, and history pressed down upon them both. Do you know what Commander Phillips is saying? Harrington finally broke the silence, his voice low and controlled. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. I can imagine, sir. He claims you've become obsessed with my wife's death, that you fabricated connections between Elizabeth and Blake, that you attacked him when he came to check on your mental state. Harrington opened the folder, revealing photographs of the silenced pistol found in Rebecca's quarters. He says this was planted, that you're suffering from paranoid delusions. The accusation hung in the air between them. 29 years of naval service had taught Harrington to maintain a perfect poker face. Rebecca couldn't read what lay behind his words. Was he testing her? Had he already decided, Sir, before I respond, I need to know something? Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Who else knows I'm here? Who's overseeing this investigation? A flicker of surprise crossed Harrington's features. I've kept this contained. Naval intelligence wanted to take over, but I've maintained jurisdiction for now. Just me, the MPs who brought you in, and Lieutenant Cooper. He paused. Why? Rebecca took a deep breath. Everything depended on this moment, on whether the trust they'd built was real, whether Elizabeth's faith in her husband had been justified. Because Commander Phillips is part of an organization called Octagon. The words emerged with quiet certainty. They're responsible for the TAC intel thefts, and I believe they killed your wife. Harrington's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. That's an extraordinary accusation, Lieutenant. I have extraordinary evidence, sir. Rebecca's hand moved slowly to her jacket. With your permission. At his nod, she carefully extracted the USB drive from its hiding place and placed it on the table between them. Elizabeth sent you this the week before she died. It contains everything: financial records, communications, operational details, evidence she was gathering against Senator Blake, his son, and their network. She encrypted it specifically for me using a system we developed at Stanford. Harrington stared at the small device recognition dawning in his eyes. The drive she sent me, that I could never access. She knew I could decrypt it. She was creating a failsafe, sir. Rebecca's voice softened. In case something happened to her. The Admiral's composure slipped, momentarily grief flashing across his weathered features before military discipline reasserted itself. Why would Phillips be involved? He was my right hand for 20 years. He served with me from the Shenandoah to the Kennedy. He stood beside me at Elizabeth's funeral, for God's sake. Which gave him perfect positioning to monitor you, sir, to ensure you never got too close to the truth. Rebecca leaned forward. Phillips was the one who informed you of Elizabeth's death, wasn't he, while you were deployed with the Eisenhower in the Mediterranean? Harrington's eyes narrowed. How did you know that? Cooper mentioned it. October 1986, Operation Attain document. Rebecca watched understanding begin to dawn on his face. Phillips was first on the scene after her accident. He handled the investigation. He made sure it was ruled mechanical failure. Harrington's breathing had become shallow, his mind visibly reassessing 2 decades of friendship and service in the harsh light of this new possibility. What's on the drive? He finally asked. Evidence that Octagon has been systematically extracting classified encryption technology. The TAC intel devices are just the beginning. They've compromised nuclear command protocols, created backdoors in military communication systems. Rebecca's voice hardened. They're preparing to sell this technology. Operation Compass Rose, a handoff scheduled for next week. Harrington sat perfectly still, absorbing the implications. Then he pressed an intercom button on the wall. Cooper, bring me a secure laptop, no network connection, and I need the room sealed, no recordings. Minutes later, Cooper delivered the laptop and departed without a word, closing the door behind him. Harrington inserted the drive, then looked expectantly at Rebecca. The passphrase is from Shakespeare, she explained, typing the familiar words. And this, our life exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brook, sermons in stones, and good in everything. The screen flickered as the encryption unlocked, revealing Elizabeth Harrington's digital legacy. Her final message to Rebecca appeared first. Harrington read it silently, his face transforming with each line, grief and rage warring beneath his professional facade. For the next hour, they moved methodically through the files. Financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies. Communication transcripts between Blake and foreign buyers. Security clearance authorizations with Phillips's signature, allowing access to restricted areas where TASINTEL devices were stored. and finally a folder labeled Elizabeth's Journal, containing daily entries documenting her investigation. The final entry, dated October 13th, 1986, the day before her death. Met with Martin today. He agrees we have enough to take to the FBI. Blake's people are watching me. Black sedan followed me from the grocery store. Taking precautions. We'll tell Bill everything when he returns next week. Pray this USB reaches Rebecca if something happens. She'll know what to do. Harrington closed the laptop, his face ashen. For a moment he seemed older, the weight of command and personal loss pressing down upon his shoulders. 29 years of service, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I've sent men to their deaths. I've ordered strikes that destroyed entire installations. I've made peace with necessary violence in defense of this nation. His eyes met Rebecca's. But this is treason from within, from people I trusted. Rebecca nodded, understanding the profound betrayal he was processing. Sir Compass Rose is scheduled for next week. A technology transfer at the Norfolk storage facility. If we move quickly, we can catch them all. Blake Phillips, the buyers. Harrington's expression hardened into something terrible to behold, cold fury tempered by tactical precision. Who else knows about this, about what's on this drive? Captain Martin Harris from Naval Intelligence. He worked with Elizabeth. He's been reassigned to Alaska, but went off-grid instead. He contacted me last night. Rebecca hesitated. He wanted to take this to the FBI directly. I insisted on bringing it to you first. Smart man to go off-grid. Not so smart to approach you directly. Harrington's mind was clearly racing, calculating options and risks. If Octagon has penetrated as deeply as these files suggest, normal channels are compromised. We need to be extremely careful about who we involve. He stood abruptly. You'll remain in custody officially. It gives us cover while we prepare. Cooper will be your handler. I trust him with my life. We have 5 days until Compass Rose. His eyes locked with hers. Are you prepared to finish what Elizabeth started, Lieutenant? The price could be high. Rebecca rose to meet his gaze. She was the only friend I ever had, sir. I owe her this. Harrington nodded once. Then we have work to do. The door opened to admit Lieutenant Cooper, his expression carefully neutral as Harrington issued crisp instructions about Rebecca's continued detention and required security measures. Only the slightest flicker in Cooper's eyes betrayed his understanding that something fundamental had shifted. As Harrington prepared to leave, he paused beside Rebecca, speaking so softly that only she could hear. Elizabeth always saw the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. His hand briefly touched her shoulder. Don't make her wrong about either of us. Then he was gone, leaving Rebecca alone with Cooper and the weight of a mission that had already claimed one life she valued. The game had begun in earnest now. The stakes: national security, justice for Elizabeth, and the lives of everyone involved in bringing Octagon's conspiracy to light. The clock was ticking toward Compass Rose. The secure communications room, deep within Norfolk Naval Station, hummed with electronic equipment screens glowing in the dimly lit space. 3 days had passed since Rebecca's confrontation with Phillips, each hour, a careful dance of preparation and misdirection. Officially, Lieutenant Mitchell remained in restricted quarters, her security clearances suspended pending investigation. Unofficially, she worked alongside Harrington Cooper and the small team they had assembled to prepare for the Compass Rose operation. Rebecca studied the facility schematics projected on the main screen, the Norfolk storage facility where the handoff would take place. A secure warehouse within the larger naval complex designated for housing sensitive electronic equipment. The perfect cover for moving TACTINTEL devices without raising flags. Surveillance confirms increased activity, Cooper reported, pointing to thermal imaging scans. 4 additional security personnel added in the past 48 hours, all with credentials traced back to Blake's command. Harrington nodded, studying the building layout. Entry points. Main entrance requires biometric access, handprint, and retinal scan. Service entrance uses keycard only, but it's monitored by cameras. Roof access through the ventilation system, but they've installed motion sensors. Cooper displayed each access point as he spoke. Our best option remains the original plan. Use the Admiral's authority to conduct an unscheduled inspection immediately prior to the exchange. Rebecca frowned, mentally calculating risks. Phillips will have anticipated that. He knows the Admiral's inspection protocols. Which is why we're not following protocol, Harrington replied. We're creating a new emergency response drill specifically for this situation. He turned to the third member of their core team, Captain Edward Collins, from Naval Criminal Investigative Service, one of the few senior officers Harrington trusted implicitly. Collins was a weathered veteran of internal investigations, his Boston accent lending a distinctive cadence to his speech. My team's ready, Admiral. 6 agents, all handpicked from outside the normal Norfolk rotation. Nobody who's worked with Phillips or had contact with Blake's people. Rebecca appreciated the precaution, but saw the limitation. 6 agents against how many hostiles? Intelligence suggests at least 8 Octagon operatives on site, plus the buyers, likely a 4-person team based on previous patterns. Collins didn't sugarcoat the odds. We're outnumbered and walking into their territory. Which is why timing is everything, Harrington interjected. We move during the actual exchange, when both the tax intel devices and the payment are present. Maximum evidence, maximum confusion. The strategy made tactical sense, but Rebecca identified the critical vulnerability. Sir, with respect, you shouldn't be on site. You're too valuable a target. Phillips knows you personally. He'll recognize any deception immediately. Harrington's expression hardened. I'm not sending my people into a trap I'm unwilling to enter myself, Lieutenant. Besides, my presence is essential to the plan. His tone left no room for argument. Phillips believes he's successfully contained the situation, that you're isolated and discredited, that I've accepted his version of events. My participation maintains that illusion until the moment we strike. Rebecca recognized the steel behind his words. This was personal for him, his wife, his trusted officer, his command compromised. He couldn't delegate this mission. There's another factor we need to consider, she said instead, redirecting the conversation. Captain Harris, he threatened to contact the FBI if I didn't report back within 24 hours. That deadline passed 2 days ago. Cooper exchanged glances with Harrington. We've been monitoring FBI channels. No indication of any investigation being initiated. Which means either Harris was bluffing, he's been compromised, or he's planning something independently, Harrington concluded. None of those scenarios helps us. Rebecca thought of Harris, his intensity, his dedication to Elizabeth's mission. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to contact him, bring him in. He has intimate knowledge of Elizabeth's investigation connections we might need. Harrington considered the request, weighing risks against potential benefits. Too dangerous to meet in person, but we could arrange a secure communication. Cooper, the lieutenant nodded. I can set up an encrypted channel through one of our secondary systems, off the main grid. Do it, Harrington ordered, but be extremely careful what information we share. Need to know only. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to their assignments, Harrington held Rebecca back. When they were alone, his official demeanor softened fractionally. How are you holding up, Lieutenant? The unexpected personal concern caught Rebecca off guard. I'm operational, sir. Harrington's slight smile acknowledged the standard military response. That wasn't my question. Rebecca considered how to answer. The past 3 days had been a psychological gauntlet, processing Elizabeth's death as murder, rather than accident, confronting the conspiracy that had claimed her friend, preparing for an operation that might well cost more lives. I'm angry, sir, she admitted finally, and determined. Harrington nodded, understanding all too well. Anger can be useful if properly channeled. Just don't let it cloud your judgment. He paused. Elizabeth wouldn't have wanted that. Did you read all her journal entries, sir? Rebecca asked quietly. Every word. Pain flashed across his features. She suspected something for months before she found concrete evidence. Wanted to protect me by handling it herself. Regret colored his voice. If I'd been there instead of deployed. She made the choices she believed were right, Rebecca said, just as we're doing now. The Admiral studied her for a moment. You're not what I expected, Lieutenant Mitchell. When I first read your file, I saw a disciplinary problem, someone who couldn't follow orders. And now, sir, now I see why Elizabeth believed in you. He straightened, the brief moment of personal connection passing as he resumed command bearing. Get some rest. Tomorrow we finalize the operation. As Rebecca returned to her secured quarters, she felt the weight of expectations pressing down Elizabeth's faith. Harrington's trust, the mission's importance. Each step forward narrowed their options and increased the danger. Octagon had killed before to protect their operation. They wouldn't hesitate to do so again. She secured her door and performed her now routine sweep for surveillance devices. Finding none, she retrieved Elizabeth's USB drive from its hiding place and connected it to the secure laptop Cooper had provided. There was something in Elizabeth's files she needed to review again, something that had been nagging at the edges of her consciousness. The journal entries loaded on screen, Elizabeth's words bringing her presence into the room almost tangibly. Rebecca scrolled to entries from September 1986 when the investigation had intensified. SEPTI 3 traced financial transfers through Cayman accounts, money moving from military contractors through shell companies, ultimately reaching numbered accounts in Zurich. Blake's signature on the original appropriations, pattern becoming clear. SEPTI 15 installed monitoring software on secure terminal, flagged anomalous data transmissions from Norfolk to external server. Phillips involved in security protocol adjustments that created vulnerabilities. Cannot believe Bill's friend would betray him this way. SEP 22, growing concerned about surveillance, changed daily routines using different vehicles. Martin suggests documenting everything in multiple locations, creating backup of all files for Rebecca. If she's still at her last known posting, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Unit. Rebecca paused, something in the phrasing catching her attention. Pacific Fleet Intelligence, she'd never served in that unit. Elizabeth had been tracking her naval career through official channels, not knowing that Rebecca had transferred to electronic warfare systems after her confrontation with Commander Wilson on the USS Nimitz. Which meant Rebecca's blood ran cold as the implication clarified. If Elizabeth had been sending copies of her evidence to Rebecca's previous posting, those files might have been intercepted. Someone else might have known about the USB drive sent to Harrington, known, and been waiting for it to resurface. She quickly searched through more journal entries, looking for any mention of what specific evidence Elizabeth might have sent to that posting. The entries grew more cautious over time, with fewer explicit details, Elizabeth becoming increasingly security conscious as she realized the scope of what she'd uncovered. Then a critical entry from October 5th, just 9 days before her death. Octi5 copied to Sintel's security protocols to secure a packet, sending to Rebecca's posting via trusted courier, too sensitive for electronic transmission. These codes would allow full access to nuclear command channels if combined with the physical devices. Cannot risk interception. The TS Intel security protocols, the final piece Octagon, would need to fully exploit the stolen devices. Elizabeth had sent them separately from the evidence on the USB drive, creating an additional safeguard. If those protocols had been intercepted at Rebecca's former posting, she needed to alert Harrington immediately. This changed their understanding of Octagon's capabilities and timing. Compass Rose might not just be about selling technology to foreign buyers, it could be about activating a system already in place. Rebecca reached for the secure phone Cooper had provided, then hesitated as a new thought struck her. If Elizabeth's communications had been monitored, if Octagon had penetrated as deeply as they now suspected, who else might be compromised? Cooper had served under Harrington for years alongside Phillips. Collins came from NCIS, an organization these files suggested had been infiltrated at several levels. Trust no one, Harrington had warned her initially. Now that warning took on new significance. She needed to verify her suspicion before raising an alarm that might alert the very people they were trying to catch. Elizabeth had mentioned a trusted courier. If she could identify who had transported those protocols, perhaps they could confirm whether the package had actually reached its destination. Rebecca returned to the journal entries, searching for any mention of the courier's identity. Elizabeth had become increasingly careful about naming individuals, but perhaps there was a clue, a reference she could decipher. A soft knock at her door interrupted her concentration. She quickly closed the laptop, sliding it under her pillow before calling. "Yes, Lieutenant, it's Cooper. We've established the secure channel to contact Harris. Admiral Harrington requests your presence." Rebecca checked her watch, nearly midnight. "I'll be right there." She secured the USB drive in its hiding place and composed herself. The new information about the TAS Intel protocols remained foremost in her mind, but she needed more confirmation before sharing it. Harris might provide that verification if he'd been working closely with Elizabeth. The secure communications room was empty, save for Harrington and Cooper when she arrived. A modified radio set had been configured for burst transmission, a short encrypted message that would be difficult to intercept or trace. We've broadcast on the frequency Harris provided through the pager, Cooper explained. If he's monitoring, he should respond within the next 10 minutes. Harrington gestured for Rebecca to take the operator's seat. You've had direct contact. He'll recognize your voice. She settled at the console, adjusting the headset as Cooper provided final instructions. Keep it brief. No specific operational details. We just need to confirm his status and determine whether he has additional intelligence that could assist us. Rebecca nodded her understanding. The equipment before her was familiar. Similar systems were used in naval electronic warfare, designed for secure communication in hostile environments. She activated the microphone. Pathfinder to Lighthouse. Authentication code 3796. Do you copy? Static filled the channel for several seconds before a distorted voice responded. Lighthouse receiving. Authentication confirmed. Secure transmission window 2 minutes. Harris's voice deliberately masked by electronic distortion, but recognizable in cadence. Relief washed through Rebecca. At least he hadn't been captured or eliminated. Status report requested, she transmitted. Compromised location. Relocated 3 times in past 72 hours. Surveillance detected. FBI contact non-responsive. Harris's transmission came through in clipped phrases. Time window for intervention closing. Target operation confirmed as Compass Rose. Additional intelligence foreign buyer identified as former KGB operative Leonid Barkov, operating independent network post-Soviet dissolution. Rebecca glanced at Harrington, who nodded grimly. The identification of Barkov added a significant dimension to their understanding. If former Soviet intelligence operatives were acquiring American encryption technology, the implications extended far beyond simple theft. Request confirmation, Rebecca transmitted. Subject Kingfisher transmitted take-and-tell protocols to Pacific Fleet Intelligence. Status of package. A pause longer than the previous response intervals. When Harris finally replied, concern was evident, even through the distortion. Negative. Kingfisher secured protocols in split location, half to Admiral directly, half retained by trusted third party. Pacific Fleet transmission was disinformation. Rebecca's eyes widened. Elizabeth had created an elaborate security measure, deliberately mentioning a false transmission in her journal, anticipating it might be compromised. The actual protocols were divided between Harrington and an unnamed third party. Identify third party, she requested urgently. Unknown. Kingfisher compartmentalized final failsafe. Need to abort current operation plan. High probability of trap. The transmission quality degraded, background interference increasing. Compass Rose is not what you think. It's the transmission cutout suddenly replaced by harsh electronic noise. Cooper worked frantically at the controls trying to re-establish connection. Signal lost, he reported after several attempts. Either Harris terminated deliberately or someone interrupted the transmission. Harrington's expression had darkened. What did he mean about the protocols being split? I never received any codes from Elizabeth. She might have hidden them, Rebecca suggested. Something that wouldn't seem like classified material. A letter, a photograph, a gift. The Admiral's eyes widened with sudden realization. The book. Sir, a week before she died, Elizabeth sent me a book while I was deployed. Shakespeare's As You Like It. I assumed it was just a thoughtful gift. She knew I missed our literature discussions when at sea. Harrington's mind was visibly racing. I still have it in my quarters. Never opened it after her death. Couldn't bear to. We need to check it immediately, Rebecca urged, already moving toward the door. Cooper deactivated the communication equipment. I'll secure this setup and join you. 20 minutes later, they gathered in Harrington's private quarters, a spartanly furnished apartment within the senior officer's residence building. Military efficiency defined the space with minimal personal effects, save for a small collection of photographs. Elizabeth's presence was evident in the few domestic touches, hand-woven throws, carefully selected artwork, bookshelves organized with literary precision. Harrington moved directly to one particular shelf, removing a leather-bound volume of Shakespeare with reverent hands. The book showed no signs of having been read, its spine uncreased, pages pristine. I kept it as she sent it, he explained, voice tight with emotion. Couldn't bring myself to open it after. He carefully laid the book on his desk and opened it. The pages appeared normal, containing the expected text of As You Like It. Nothing obviously stood out as hidden information. Maybe between the pages, Cooper suggested, or invisible ink. Rebecca considered the problem from Elizabeth's perspective. A mathematician with expertise in encryption sending half of the critical protocols to her husband, how would she have hidden them? It's in the text itself, she realized suddenly. A book cipher. Harrington looked up sharply. Of course, she would have known I'd recognize it. He examined the book more carefully. But where's the key? How would I know which passages contain the coded information? Rebecca thought of the Shakespeare quote that had unlocked Elizabeth's USB drive. And this our life exempt from public haunt finds tongues in trees. Books in the running brook, sermons in stones, and good in everything. It's from Act 2, Scene 1, Harrington confirmed. Jacques' famous speech about finding tongues in trees and books in brooks. Rebecca carefully turned to that page. The passage appeared normal, but when she looked more closely, she noticed almost imperceptible marks beneath certain letters, tiny dots that would be invisible to casual inspection. Here, she pointed, she marked specific letters, a substitution cipher using this passage as the key. Cooper procured paper and pencil, and they began the painstaking process of decoding. As the pattern emerged, Rebecca felt a chill of recognition. The resulting code wasn't a complete protocol. It was half of one designed to be combined with whatever the unknown third party possessed. It's brilliant, she murmured. Even if Octagon intercepted this, it would be useless without the other half. Harrington studied the partial code. This appears to be access parameters for TaxIntel's command protocol verification. The missing half would contain the authentication sequences. Which means Compass Rose isn't just about selling the physical devices, Cooper concluded. They need the complete protocols to make the technology fully functional. Rebecca's mind raced ahead to the implications. Sir, if they don't have the complete protocols yet, they must believe they can obtain them during the exchange. That's why the operation is happening now after all this time. Harrington's expression darkened with understanding. They think we have both halves, that Elizabeth's USB drive contained everything they need. We've been operating under a dangerous misconception, Rebecca stated. We thought we were planning to interrupt their sale, but they're planning to extract information from us during the operation. The three exchanged grim looks as the true nature of Compass Rose clarified. They weren't walking into a simple sting operation. They were walking into an elaborate trap with Octagon believing Harrington possessed the complete protocols they needed. We need to completely revise our approach, Harrington decided. If they're expecting to extract information, they'll have different security protocols, different personnel on site. Or we can use their misconception against them, Rebecca suggested, a strategy forming in her mind. Let them think we're bringing the complete protocols. Draw out everyone involved. Extremely high risk, Cooper warned. If they realize we're playing them, all operations against Octagon carry extreme risk at this point, Harrington replied. But Lieutenant Mitchell is right. This may be our best opportunity to capture the entire network, Blake Phillips, the buyers, everyone involved. He stood military bearing, asserting itself as decisions crystallized into action. Cooper, contact Collins. Complete security revision of the operation plan. I want new insertion points, new extraction protocols, everything reassessed based on this intelligence. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Mitchell, I need you to prepare a convincing facsimile of the complete protocols. Something that will pass initial inspection, but won't provide actual functionality if they manage to extract it. Rebecca nodded. I'll need access to the TaxIntel technical specifications. You'll have everything required. Work with the encryption team, but maintain compartmentalization. No one sees the complete package. As Cooper departed to execute his assignments, Harrington turned to Rebecca, his expression grave. We're accelerating our timetable. Compass Rose is scheduled for 48 hours from now, but we're moving tonight. 2200 hours. Full tactical team. The sudden change startled her. Sir, Harris's warning about a trap confirms my suspicions. The official schedule is likely misinformation. Phillips knows our standard operating procedures. He'll anticipate we'd plan for the announced date. Harrington's eyes reflected cold determination. We strike when they're still in preparation phase. Maximum disorientation. Well, what about the unknown third party? The other half of the protocols. We proceed without it. Capturing Octagon's leadership is the priority now. He checked his watch. 16 hours until execution. Get the fabricated protocols ready and get some rest, Lieutenant. Tonight will demand everything we have. As Rebecca prepared to leave, Harrington added, "One more thing. If anything happens to me during this operation, take the evidence directly to Admiral Crawford at Pacific Command. He's outside the Norfolk chain and was Elizabeth's godfather. She would have trusted him." The implications of the statement weren't lost on Rebecca. Harrington was providing her with a contingency plan, acknowledging the very real possibility that he might not survive the coming confrontation. "Nothing will happen to you, sir," she insisted. "We're going to finish this, for Elizabeth." Harrington's smile held grim determination. "For Elizabeth. And for everyone who still believes in the oath we took to defend this nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic." Rebecca departed, her mind already resting on the fabricated protocols and the imminent operation. 16 hours to prepare for a confrontation 3 years in the making. 16 hours before she would face the people responsible for Elizabeth's death. 16 hours until Compass Rose bloomed in blood and justice. The pieces were set. The trap was baited. Soon the hunters would become the hunted. And somewhere in the darkness, Octagon was watching, waiting for their moment to strike, unaware that their carefully laid plans were about to unravel at the hands of a scarred lieutenant and an admiral with nothing left to lose. The coming night would determine which side had underestimated the other. The Norfolk storage facility loomed against the night sky, its security lights casting harsh white pools across the asphalt perimeter. At 2145 hours, 15 minutes before the accelerated operation timeline, Rebecca Mitchell completed her final equipment check. Body armor beneath her naval uniform, service pistol with silencer attachment, encrypted radio earpiece connecting her to the tactical team. Inside a nondescript van half a mile from the facility, Admiral Harrington reviewed the mission parameters with Captain Collins and the NCIS tactical team. The fabricated TAC intel protocols Rebecca had created were secured in a military-grade laptop case, realistic enough to pass initial inspection, but designed to trigger security of alerts if actually deployed. Alpha Team enters through the main entrance with the Admiral and Lieutenant Mitchell, Collins outline. Bravo Team secures the perimeter and covers all exit points. Charlie Team remains on standby for emergency extraction. He looked at each member of the strike force. "Remember, these are naval officers and intelligence personnel you'll be engaging. Americans who've betrayed their oaths. Lethal force only as absolute last resort." Harrington's face was granite. "We take them alive. They face trial for what they have done." Rebecca heard the unspoken addition. "For Elizabeth." Lieutenant Cooper approached with the final intelligence update. Thermal scans show 12 individuals inside the facility, 4 in the main storage area, 8 positioned throughout the building. More than we anticipated. "Octagon isn't taking chances," Harrington noted. "They want those protocols badly." Rebecca felt the weight of the mission pressing down. "Sir, I should reiterate my concern about your direct participation." "If Phillips' discussion closed, Lieutenant," Harrington interrupted. "This is my command, my responsibility." His eyes met hers with steely resolve. "And my wife." No further argument was possible. At precisely 21:55, the teams moved into position. Rebecca and Harrington approached the main entrance in an official naval vehicle. Their arrival expected a late-night inspection that, while unusual, wouldn't trigger immediate alarms for those not part of the conspiracy. The guard at the checkpoint examined their credentials, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp. Rebecca recognized the subtle signs of enhanced alertness. This was no ordinary security officer. "Admiral Harrington, we weren't expecting you tonight, sir." "Unscheduled inspection," Harrington replied crisply. "New Pentagon protocols require random security verification for TS Intel storage facilities." The guard's hand hovered near his sidearm as he processed the information. After a beat too long, he nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll need to call this in." "Understood. Standard procedure." Harrington's casualness was masterful, betraying nothing of the tactical teams now surrounding the building. The guard made a brief call, speaking in coded language that confirmed Rebecca's suspicions. These were Octagon operatives, not regular naval security. As the gate lifted, Harrington gave the prearranged signal over his concealed mic. "Lighthouse active." They drove through to the main building's entrance, where 2 more armed guards awaited. Rebecca noted their perfect military bearing. Their watchful eyes, professionals, not rent-a-cops. Inside her jacket, she felt the comforting weight of her sidearm. "Admiral on deck," announced one guard as they entered the facility's main corridor, a formality that couldn't mask the tension beneath. A familiar figure emerged from the administrative office, Commander Phillips, immaculate in his naval uniform despite the late hour. His expression registered momentary surprise before settling into practiced composure. "Admiral Harrington, this is unexpected." Phillips's eyes flicked to Rebecca, narrowing slightly. "And Lieutenant Mitchell, I was under the impression you were still in custody." "Released under my direct supervision," Harrington replied smoothly. "Her technical expertise is required for tonight's inspection." Phillips's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, though I must say this timing is rather inconvenient. We're conducting inventory procedures tonight, which makes it the perfect time to verify security protocols," Harrington countered. He patted the secure case he carried. "We'll need access to the main storage vault." Something shifted in Phillips' demeanor, a fractional tensing of his shoulders, a subtle hardening around his eyes. "May I ask what specifically you're inspecting, Admiral?" "To Intel integrity verification." Harrington responded using the exact terminology from Octagon's own communications about Compass Rose. "Direct order from Naval Intelligence." Phillips' gaze lingered on the case for a moment too long. "I see. If you'll follow me, then." As they walked deeper into the facility, Rebecca maintained situational awareness, noting camera positions, counting personnel, identifying potential choke points. The corridors were too empty for a facility supposedly conducting inventory. They'd cleared non-essential personnel preparing for the exchange. Phillips led them through 2 security checkpoints, each requiring biometric verification. Behind them, the NCIS team would be dealing with the perimeter guards, silently securing the facility's exits. Timing was everything now. The main storage vault lay at the heart of the building, a reinforced chamber with multiple security layers. As Phillips entered the final access code, Rebecca noticed his hand was completely steady. Whatever else he might be, the man had nerves of steel. "After you, Admiral," Phillips gestured as the heavy vault door swung open. Inside, the temperature-controlled room hummed with power. Server racks lined the walls, blinking lights reflecting off polished floors. At the center stood a conference table where 3 men waited: Lieutenant Colonel Blake, his right arm still in a cast from their encounter, and 2 others in civilian attire with the unmistakable bearing of former military. Blake's expression darkened at the sight of Rebecca. "What is the meaning of this, Phillips? Admiral Harrington is conducting an unscheduled security inspection." Phillips explained, his tone neutral. "Apparently, Naval Intelligence has concerns." "Naval Intelligence?" One of the civilians spoke, his Russian accent subtle but unmistakable. "How interesting. We were just discussing intelligence matters ourselves." Leonid Barkov. Rebecca realized the former KGB operative Harris had identified. The Russian studied them with cold calculation, his eyes lingering on Harrington's secure case. "Perhaps the Admiral would care to join our discussion," Barkov suggested. "I believe we share mutual interests in information security." The pretense was wearing thin. Harrington placed the case on the table, his movements deliberate. "I understand you gentlemen are interested in TASINTEL protocols. As it happens, I've brought something that might interest you." Blake exchanged glances with Phillips. "Admiral, I'm not sure what game you're playing, but this meeting is classified beyond your clearance." "No games, Colonel," Harrington replied, steel entering his voice. "Just finishing what my wife started 3 years ago." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Phillips's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. "Bill, you don't understand what you're interfering with." "I understand perfectly, Richard." Harrington's use of Phillips' first name carried the weight of their decades of friendship now shattered. "I understand you helped murder Elizabeth, that you've been betraying your country, your oath, everything we stood for." Blake's laugh held no humor. "Dramatic accusations, Admiral, but ultimately meaningless without proof." "We have the proof," Rebecca interjected. "Elizabeth's files, the USB drive, everything." "Then you know why we're doing this," Phillips replied, his voice softening, almost pleading. "The Cold War is ending. The power structure is shifting. Someone needs to maintain America's advantage in the chaos that's coming." "By selling our security protocols to the highest bidder," Harrington demanded. Barkov smiled thinly. "Not selling, Admiral. Strategic partnership. The world is changing. Old enemies will become new allies. We're simply accelerating the process." "Enough talk," Blake interrupted. "Open the case, Admiral. Show us what Elizabeth was so determined to protect." The moment had come. Harrington glanced at his watch, nearly 22:10 hours. The teams should be in position. He reached for the case latches. Verification code first. Phillips insisted, his hand now openly resting on his holstered weapon. The authentication sequence from the protocols. Rebecca tensed, ready for what would come next. Harrington met Phillips's gaze directly as he spoke. The sequence is anchor rising. The code phrase triggered immediate action. Throughout the facility, concussion grenades detonated in precise sequence, disorienting any Octagon personnel not in the vault. Simultaneously, the NCIS tactical teams breached from multiple entry points. Inside the vault, Rebecca moved with practiced efficiency. As Phillips reached for his weapon, she executed the same joint lock maneuver she'd used on Blake, driving him to his knees with a painful twist that forced him to release his sidearm. Blake lunged across the table, but Harrington was faster. 29 years of naval service hadn't dulled his combat reflexes. The Admiral's fist connected with Blake's jaw, sending him sprawling. Barkov and his associate reacted with professional calm, reaching for concealed weapons. Before they could fire, the vault door burst open and Collins's team flooded in, weapons raised. NCIS hands where we can see them, down on the ground now. The Russians assessed the tactical situation and made the pragmatic choice, slowly lowering their weapons and kneeling with hands raised. Within moments, the vault was secured. Similar reports flooded in from throughout the facility. All Octagon personnel contained minimal resistance encountered. The operation had succeeded beyond expectations. As Phillips was handcuffed and read his rights, he looked up at Harrington, his expression a complex mixture of defiance and regret. "You think this ends here? Octagon isn't just a few people in a room, Bill. It's an idea, a necessity." "No," Harrington replied quietly. "It's treason, and you'll answer for it." He turned away from his former friend, unable to bear the sight any longer. Rebecca knelt beside the secured Phillips, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "Elizabeth knew, didn't she? That's why you killed her. She figured out it was you." Phillips' eyes met hers, cold and empty. "She was naive, like you. She couldn't see that sometimes protecting America means breaking its rules." His gaze shifted to Harrington. "She loved him too much to let him make the hard choices. So we made them for him." "We," Phillips smiled thinly. "You've caught some fish, Lieutenant, but the ocean is very deep." Before Rebecca could press further, Collins approached. "Admiral, we've secured all objectives. No casualties. Evidence recovery teams are inbound." Harrington nodded, his expression grim but satisfied. "Good work, Captain. Ensure maximum security for the prisoners. These men have powerful friends." As the NCIS team escorted the prisoners from the vault, Rebecca found herself alone with Harrington among the blinking server racks. For a moment, neither spoke the weight of what they'd accomplished and what it had cost settling around them. "It doesn't bring her back," Harrington said, finally, his voice rough with emotion. "No, sir, but it honors her." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "She died protecting what she believed in." Who she believed in. The Admiral's weathered hand touched one of the servers that housed the nation's most critical security systems. Systems his wife had died defending, systems his friend had betrayed. She always saw the truth in people, the best and the worst. His eyes met Rebecca's. "She saw something in you worth believing in." She was right. Rebecca felt the unexpected sting of tears. "I wish I'd answered her letters." "You answered when it mattered most." Harrington straightened his commander's bearing, returning. "There's still work to do. Phillips was right about one thing: we haven't caught everyone involved in Octagon. Not by a long shot." "What happens now, sir?" "Now we follow the evidence. Every financial transaction, every communication, every security breach. We dismantle their network completely." Determination hardened his voice. "And we find the third party, whoever has the other half of Elizabeth's protocols. They're still out there, still vulnerable." Rebecca nodded, already planning the investigation ahead. "We'll find them, sir." As they exited the facility into the cool night air, flashing lights from security vehicles illuminated the scene. Naval personnel and NCIS agents secured the perimeter, processed evidence, loaded prisoners into transport vehicles. Above them, stars wheeled in the vast Virginia sky, the same stars that had guided sailors for centuries, unchanging despite the turmoil below. The same stars Elizabeth Harrington had gazed upon before her life was cut short by those she trusted. 3 weeks later, Rebecca Mitchell stood at attention in Admiral Harrington's office as he reviewed her transfer orders. Pacific Command has requested you specifically, Lieutenant. Cryptographic Security Division. It seems your work on Operation Compass Rose impressed the right people. Rebecca accepted the orders. Thank you, sir, though I admit I have mixed feelings about leaving Norfolk. Your expertise is needed elsewhere. Harrington rose from behind his desk. The investigation continues. 17 Octagon operatives identified and arrested so far. Senator Blake has resigned for health reasons. Phillips and his son will face court-martial. In Barkov, diplomatic complications. But he won't be returning to Russia anytime soon. Harrington moved to the window, gazing out at the naval yard below. We still haven't identified Elizabeth's third party. The other half of the protocols remain secure, but unlocated. Rebecca nodded, understanding the implications. Perhaps that's for buyers who best, well, for now. Perhaps, the Admiral turned back to face her. Before you go, there's one more thing. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small velvet-covered box. This belonged to Elizabeth, her service medal from her work in naval intelligence. I think she would want you to have it. Rebecca accepted the box with trembling hands. Sir, I don't deserve. You earned it, Lieutenant. Harrington's voice was firm but gentle. Not just by finishing what she started, but by showing the same courage, the same integrity she valued so highly. He extended his hand. The Navy needs more officers like you, not fewer. Remember that when you encounter the next Blake or Phillips. Rebecca shook his hand, feeling the connection that had formed between them, forged in fire, tempered by shared loss and shared purpose. I will, sir. As she departed Norfolk Naval Station the next morning, Rebecca gazed back at the sprawling installation, the place where her journey had begun with a summoning to an admiral's office, where she had revealed her scars and found unexpected understanding, where she had fulfilled a promise to a friend long lost. The rising sun glinted off the water of Chesapeake Bay, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. Somewhere in that light, Rebecca thought she could feel Elizabeth's presence, not gone, not forgotten, but transformed into something that would continue to guide them both. Her hand touched the medal in her pocket, a tangible reminder of a woman she had once abandoned but had finally honored, of scars visible and invisible, of promises kept and justice served. The road ahead would not be easy. Octagon's tentacles reached deep into the institutions she had sworn to defend. More battles awaited, more scars, perhaps. But for now, in this moment, Rebecca Mitchell felt something she had rarely experienced in her difficult life. Peace. She had shown her scars to someone brave enough to see them for what they truly were, not signs of weakness, but medals of survival. And in doing so, she had found not just justice for Elizabeth, but a place where she truly belonged. The car pulled away from Norfolk, bearing her toward new challenges at Pacific Command. Behind her, Admiral William Harrington stood at his office window, watching her departure. Both carried the weight of Elizabeth's memory, both committed to continuing her work. Some battles ended. Others were just beginning. But neither would fight alone again.